Hey everybody, welcome back to Post Status Draft. I've got a special interview today because I've got a friend on in Oklahoma City that Lindsay and I have got the chance to work with very recently. Lindsay's known her a long, long time, so I'm a new friend. But I wanted to ask her because we've been talking about some really critical topics together. Her and Lindsay have been. She's been instrumental in really helping Lindsay build her business at Content Journey. And I got a little taste of it, and I was like, Lindy, I got to have you on. Um, I know you do a lot of things, Lindy, and I'm gonna let you introduce yourself from HR strategy, a lot of business stuff, and helping a lot of people now in your role as rolling your own shingle out into the world. And I've seen it really blossom in recent history here. And so, could you tell us a little bit more about you, what you do today? And then I'm going to start poking in and saying, okay, tell me a little bit about your past and things like that.
For sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And truly, I would not be sitting in this seat in the small business incubator without Lindsay. And we were sorority sisters a very long time ago. I will not say how long ago. And I'm just so grateful. And I've loved having a front row seat to watching what you and Lindsay have built and what you're doing. So thank you for having me here today. So I founded Rivers and Roads Organizational Development. I actually filed for the LLC a year ago this week. So it has been a fantastic journey. And so I do organizational development. I call it the intersection of people and operations. My background is, excuse me, I have a master's in industrial organizational psychology. And what that led to was a 15-year career in human resources, in organizational development and change management. I had about 8 years at OU. That was kind of my jungle gym of a career. I had 6 different roles, I think, in that 8 years. And then I left in 2017 to go to an infusion pharmacy that was locally owned and operated. Had a great time there with the owners. Really had a true seat at the table in human resources and organizational development. And in 2019, they named me the chief operating officer. And so I got that operations experience. So it's kind of a weird background. I always tell people I just have this weird background that I've been so fortunate to have. And then about a year after I was moved to COO in December of 2020, we were acquired by a large national organization. And I stayed on for 18 months for that transition. And when that time was up, I wanted to pursue my long-term dream of owning my own company. And it was something that I'd always wanted to do, but it just always seemed really terrifying, and it is terrifying. But it's been great. And so there's a lot of life that happened in between those talking points that led me to hang this shingle. But it's been a great ride so far. So there you have it.
Oh, wow. There's so much. We should have booked more time for this, but
Right.
we'll come back again because there's so much here I want to dive into.
Yeah.
Um, One, congratulations. Love to celebrate entrepreneurs like yourself doing good work in the world and doing well. So congrats. I think it's timely that we would have this interview, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So that's incredible. I think when you're saying like all of this stuff and got to this, it's like it to me. My path has always seemed meandering sometimes, but when I look back, I go, "Wow, that was a
Sure.
great
Yeah.
ride." But I can see why all your background and everything led you to do those things. Because I think so often in business, it's about two things, or at least the problems. It's money and it's people. And
Right.
so like your intersection, what you said is people and operations, it's how, to me, it's how the work really gets done. How do we lead all that? And that's such deep work because to date, AI hasn't replaced us all. It's
Right.
still about people, our teams, our customers, that human interaction part. And I think that's invaluable and why we have been very thankful. I know Lindsay has to have of your caliber access to as she grows her agency. So wow. Okay, there's so much here.
So much.
I
Yeah.
think
And
if I
it's, and
had
it's,
go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think if I'd known what industrial psychology was maybe 20 years ago, I would have 30 years ago for me, I would have been like, how do I get I can do that as a job. That's
Yeah.
super cool. Psychology
Yeah.
applied in the workplace. I know Adam Grant, very
Mhm.
famous organizational psychologist. I read a ton of his stuff and I love his work.
Love his
So
stuff.
that's super cool.
Yeah, and I was so fortunate again. I mean, and again, not to use the intersection terminology again, but um, I feel like luck is the intersection of opportunity and hard work.
Mm,
And the opportunity for me was a professor at OU who said, "Hey, I really see this in you, and I think you could be great at this," which led me to apply for graduate schools, which I ended up at Middle Tennessee State University, which a couple of years after I graduated was named the top master's program in my field. So I had an incredible experience there, great professors, great connections there. Um, I don't do anything small, so I did multiple student associations and internships and practicums, and then I graduated right at the recession. So my husband and I were sort of in this race of like who can get a job first because everything looks like it's falling apart. And we
mm,
were so fortunate to find a job back home. We both started at OU. That was where we met at OU and at Norman. And so it just felt like it was, again, that intersection of opportunity and hard work. So I was fortunate to, I won't say stumble into this field because I did it consciously. But I do feel like you said, all of those experiences have led me to exactly where I am today.
well, it's not the topic I really want to talk about because as
Yeah.
we've talked in preparation for this, we have to talk about leadership and burnout and current climates and all that. I want to talk about that. But at first, I know how Lindsay was able to utilize having you two doors down, this
Right.
vast resource of experience and expertise with dealing with people and all that. Has had that great opportunity to work with you. And how I intersected with that was when she was hiring her next person, and that specific HR. So within this big nebulous of HR, you were so instrumental. And I just want to talk for a second about your approach because I really appreciated it. It wasn't overly structured, but it was structured really well and more so thoughtful. She was trying to hire for somebody you worked through. I think I'll let you talk about it, but
Yeah.
and I'll kind of come in and say some things I saw too. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I mean, being two doors down from Lindsay, like likewise, I feel the same of just the expertise and the knowledge. And I knew she was looking for her next hire. And so I love a blank whiteboard. And so we started whiteboarding just what are you looking for? The competencies, the behaviors, where might this person have come from? What kind of experiences are you looking for them to have had? And then we had this huge full whiteboard. It was like, all right, what are the deal breakers? And I think when it comes to hiring, you have to think about deal breakers, just like we do in relationships, like what are deal breakers for a significant other. And I'm, hashtag careful,
Mhm.
like don't make a significant other out of your next hire. um but I just mean like there are some commonalities where we have to live with this. And so what are the deal breakers? If this person did or didn't have these things, what would that be like? So that gives me sort of a profile of what we're looking for outside of just your typical education, experience, background, those kind of things. So competencies, behaviors. Um, and so then where we went from there is so I've hired for 15 years across all kinds of different positions, healthcare, higher ed, you name it, I've hired it, I feel like. And so I had to get really efficient in my hiring. And so I always tell people like your job description, number one, is your first line of defense on everything of making the right hire, of workers' comp, leave, disciplinary actions, performance management, anything. And so job descriptions feel really boring and nobody likes to do them, including me. It's my least favorite thing to do. Maybe not my least, but I don't enjoy it. But it's so important to get the job description right. So then once you have the job description and you know what you're looking for, then you start calling through your applicants and looking through, however and so we posted it on LinkedIn. And I know I'm kind of like dancing around here. I don't always think very linearly. But so we put it on LinkedIn, saw who was coming through, and then once we had applications, then your next line of defense is your phone screen. And I have a couple of tricks up my sleeve with phone screens. Number one, I think you have the applicant call you.
I love
Um,
that, by the way.
oh
That
my
was so
gosh.
brilliant.
It's such a small thing. But here's the thing that was so funny to me, like this was sort of a learning lab for me, was for this sort of marketing role. They were Johnny on the spot. They were calling me early. Like sometimes I wasn't fully ready. Full disclosure, because like I mean, I'm a just-in-time delivery kind of gal. Like I am, if it's at noon, I'm ready at noon. Sometimes noon 02. But so like when I used to hire nurses, they would never call me on time. And like I'm not making a sweeping generalization about nurses, but like what I learned was they didn't live and die by their calendar
Mm-hmm.
like an
Mm-hmm.
office professional does. So like that may not have worked for that role. So like your mileage may vary with your role, but for this like organized office, like sort of computer facing person, like to say, this is your time to call me. And so then we did a phone screen where we had questions that were those deal breakers, right? So tell me about a time when, like, give me a specific example. Like, don't tell me what you would do, tell me what you have done, because your past performance is your best predictor of future success, right? So, like, tell me about a time when. So, running through some of those scenarios, and you're just getting a feel for the person. You're just, how do they talk? How do they arrange their thoughts? How do they, you know, what excites them and what doesn't? And so I use this word cautiously, but because you can't hire on vibes, but you just sort of get a feel. And I'm so fortunate that I've spent enough time with Lindsay's team that I knew like there was just one person I was like, there was just this vibe of like it just wasn't going to be a fit.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so phone screens, take notes, share this with the team. And then from there, the team took it on to Zoom interviews. Oh, go ahead.
Can I pause you right there
Yeah.
because I don't want to gloss over you weren't, but I don't want to gloss over this. So if we scroll back, we went from job interview, major things, getting some job descriptions so people can be interested in it. And part of that's
Mhm.
marketing. You
Yeah.
do want someone to go, this is me, I'm interested in this, do that. What's really interesting about the process and what you said is, so putting that job description out there, I've heard accounts from this from our members and other entrepreneurs, is you're getting the deluge of potential applicants. Like some of these
Yes.
sites have auto apply things. What's
Hate that.
interesting to me too is you took the deluge and you're starting to sort with that first interview. And I don't want to scroll past that too fast because I think it was brilliant. One, back to being thoughtful, you had an intention. Let me have them call me.
Yeah.
That's so, and knowing more about that particular job too, I go, wow. I remember hearing that going, that's brilliant. Now, the second one was, I was like, I had this first glance of like, I know how experienced of an executive you are. And I go, we're putting like high power here into that very first. And it was so interesting because, but who better? Someone that has seasoned that kind of can pick up on some things. And that part too is like you were such an incredible sorting mechanism too. It's just like these interviews, this whole process is so time consuming up until
Is
like a shotgun wedding. Okay, we're going to do it.
right.
You
And then
know,
you're like, let's just, yeah. And then and I think what happens, and this is a major part of my hiring philosophy here, is when it takes so much time, you get the deluge, you get the, how do I weed out? How do I find? And I think one thing that happens really easily is you start to do this like, I like the person. And I used to have a boss who was like, do not tell me if you like them. I do not care if you like them. I want to know if they're a good fit. And if you're not careful, you fall into the trap of, oh, I like this person, which then I think leads into things like hiring people who are exactly like you
yeah.
and you lack diversity. Um, I think you sort of start to overlook some things that could be red flags and problematic because you're like, oh, well, they're just a really likable person. And then also, like, I think we miss out on a whole group of people who might be a more introverted preference, who maybe don't let all of that show immediately. And so it's sort of digging. But then I think the next thing that happens for me, and it does happen as early on as those phone screens, is I tell my clients all the time, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And if you hire a hell maybe, you will be calling me again in 6 months. So like you have to get those deal breakers. And so something that was always really common for us when we were hiring nurses is we spent a lot of time, our nurses spent a lot of time in their cars because we covered the state. And so we would ask them, how do you feel about windshield time? Like, would you be okay with, spending so much time in the car? And there would inevitably be somebody who would say, oh, I've never really done that. I've done bedside. I don't love driving. I'm not familiar with the city. I don't. And then I would have the nurse manager later be like, but, maybe she'll like it. And it's like, he or she has given you every indication that this is not what they want to do. or they've told you, even down to the level of, I did that in home health and I hated it. And because of the nature of nursing, especially nursing in the time of COVID, we'd be like, well, let's just see if they've changed. No, they have not changed their mind. That's a hell no for me, and that's a hell no for them. And if you accept that early and often, then you're not going to have to do it like you do it right or do it twice, right? And so knowing what your deal breakers are, and so another perfect example right now is, if you know that your job is on site, if you know that your job, like for whatever reason, I have a lot of clients that it's, it's maybe, it's a warehouse, it's something that is physically have to be on site. If you ask them what their ideal work environment is and they say remote or hybrid, if you cannot give them that, need
Yeah.
not apply. Need not apply. So anyway, that's my soapbox about hell yes or hell no.
And from the organizational side, I like that you had talked to Lyndi, in this case, the hiring person, and understood those key things, and then starting to, with seasoned veteran executive, be able to do that. What did shock me is I'm aware of one of the ones that was like not a good vibe. And I thought, when does someone not realize that, one, it's just good human to be nice and cordial to everyone?
Mhm.
But oftentimes, I'd walk into an office, first person there is the receptionist.
Mhm.
And I go, it does me no harm to be nice and human to someone. And I remember one of those studies was like, do they not understand, or even in the world of possibility, that someone on the other side could be extremely knowledgeable, extremely experienced, have their bullshit meter on, and go,
Yes.
you're going to treat that person poorly? Well,
Well,
you just
yeah, and
sorted mechanism.
you did. You just did it for me. And like I've been, and I won't say if this was during this process or not, but like I asked a question and somebody was like, well, if you look at my resume, what you'll see is, and it was just so like almost accusing me of not having looked at your resume. And it's like, I have looked at but I am asking you specifically
Yeah.
about this experience. And it just, and so I give people the benefit of the doubt, but then if another time they give that kind of like feedback, it's like, if this is how you are acting on your best behavior,
Right.
if that is how you are going to talk to another human on your best behavior, I think again they made some comment. I can't remember what it was. I blocked this person out, but something along the lines of like, well, yeah, what I said is, I mean, just something kind of snippy that you're just like, no, like you are going to be client facing, you are going to be working on a team. And so again, it's like those spidey senses, right? Of like,
Oh,
if
yeah.
this is how you are at your best behavior, how are you going to be in a difficult client interaction? How are you going to be when we're having a tough conversation? So anyway, that's for sure. Like there's just all of those pieces go together, and it's all data. It's all data to give you to make the right decision.
Well, for a lot of our members, they don't have hiring departments. They don't
Mhm.
have recruiters. They're trying to do everything themselves, but you do want someone with your kind of expertise to probably do some of the initial stuff. I see so much immense value there, because then I knew there was at least a spreadsheet of, okay, here's the ones I'm going to present. They're going to go past the second leg. And I think that's where I cut you off. But like, it was so incredible to have that just here, ready to get some semblance. I could look at their website. I could do those things because I was part of that second or third team, I think, that kind of contributed. Okay. So I cut you off there. So please
Nope.
continue on. So second phase.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, after that, you all kind of took the reins. You did the Zoom interviews. It actually worked out perfectly. I think I was going to a conference where I was presenting, and so you all rolled into the Zoom interviews with sort of, hey, here's who I'm recommending. Choose your own adventure. Like, who from here do you want to interview? And then when I came back from that conference, you all had narrowed it down, and then Lindsay and I participated in some Zoom interviews just as that final sort of confirmation step. But and I like, if I can just be totally honest, there was part of the time where I was like, is this, am I getting the candidates that they want? Are we narrowing it down appropriately? We did kind of have a broad brush of what we were looking for. It could have been pretty early career. It could have been somebody more established. It could have been somebody that we, sort of taught some of the things you. Um, but it ended up working out great. I think you all made a great hire. And then on the back end, what I've been doing is 30, 60, 90 days. checking in with the new hire, because I think, and I can speak from experience. I used to joke in the pharmacy that I could tell when somebody hit 90 days. I would run into them in the hallway or the restroom, or I would walk into the pharmacy and they would just have this like deer in headlights look, because it was like you'd been there long enough that everybody stopped treating you like the new kid and like helping you and checking in on you, but you hadn't been there long enough to really know what you were doing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a big organization with lots to learn. Like I always said, if we were a country, you could be there 6 months and only know how to order off the menu and ask where the restroom was. Like it took a solid year of learning to feel totally comfortable there. And so like I could almost set my watch by it that like, oh, I got to go check on that person because they're going to be, that's the day that they're going to feel like they're drowning. And so those check-ins to be like, how do we compare? How do you feel? Do you have what you need? And the beauty of me being a neutral third party is you can really
Yep.
tell me what's working and what's not without offending anybody. And I become sort of the filter.
That's the other thing I was just thinking of is third party with a more objective view on things. And I
Mhm.
didn't know about the check-ins, by the way. So I think that's brilliant because that's the thoughtful, intentional way. Because Lyndi, when we boil this down to, you go hiring somebody, we're not talking about Fortune 500 countries here where you can like hire somebody and kind of get a wash in a big thing and some of the inefficiencies or downsides. It's kind of part of the cycle. We're talking about small to medium sized businesses here, at least
Yeah.
in post status. And so those are expensive, but it's a bigger thing. I go for a startup entrepreneur hiring the first person. It could be make or break because you're
Yeah,
talking about
100%.
taking cash flow, setting aside for a salary that you're, you know, saying I'm committing to do this. And then even for some of our organizations post us, some of the bigger agencies are in the maybe 50 to 100. Those are still expensive because they've got to have that person operationally doing something that they need probably right now,
Mhm.
because of some of the hiring things within our industry and then globally. So they're risky, extremely risky propositions hiring anybody. So why wouldn't you have neutral third party with an outside perspective, with depth of experience in all this, helping do some of the front and back end side of works. And I love the side that when our second, and then I think the third, it went to Lindsay. I was a part of the second round. Is I was trying to form, had opinions, had thoughts, had perspectives, and then when it get to Lindsay, and then back that we could go, here's what we're thinking, Lyndi, and get your perspective on everything
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of I'm less so, but we're wired into all these needs, these problems that are happening, and just having somebody to kind of, am I on the same? Am I feeling this too?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that's, that's probably one of the things that I love most about my role as a consultant is I get to be someone you can bounce ideas off of. I get to, and again, with my time with Lindsay and the team, I've gotten to learn enough about the organization, and I've been fortunate that some of my clients I've had some background information on to where I can jump in fairly quickly. Like some of my strategy clients, I've spent some time building their strategy and spending time knowing what their long-term goals are. And so then when they call me in to do this hiring help, I'm not starting at, square one. I'm at like maybe square five where I can say, okay, well, here's what I know. Here's what, here's some questions that I have, to be better prepared, but I'm still not in the day to day to where it's not quite as personal.
exactly,
Whereas the people I think who are in the day to day, the risk is, man, you are drowning. You are ready to get that person hired. And so sometimes I'm not going to say desperate, but you sort of let your standards fall a little bit because you're like, we just got to get somebody in here to do the work. Whereas I can
exactly.
come in and say, hey, but we know from this experience that you've got to get this one right.
And these fractures here in this process leads to cracks and fissures that are big and just pile on
Yeah.
downstream.
Yeah.
And
Nothing impacts your business more than a bad hire. I firmly believe that. And I think,
yep,
yeah, go ahead.
we didn't have you 10 years ago when I was doing our themes. We were trying to do something. We had an HR consultant, and when we finally had someone that could kind of help us with the things like, I think I'm right here. What do you think? Because there is regulation, laws, potential things that come on besides the business case of just, is this person going to help us,
Hmm.
do these things? So we'll put your website for sure in the show notes and go to talk to Lyndi. uncoached by Lyndi or otherwise, I would say you need someone that knows this process. If you're hiring, you can't, you gotta make, you don't want to rush. Matt, my COO at iThemes, and we had this thing. I fall in love with everybody. He hates everybody. In between, we made some fairly good
Yeah,
decisions because we
that's
kind of
great.
had to,
Yeah.
but I totally advocate for having someone that's objective, third party with the experience to do that. By the way, my recommendations is you need to call Lyndi today on those type of things.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So that was a snippet. I wanted to share enough of that. We could spend probably
Yeah.
hours just talking
Yeah.
about that side, but I think that leads into this other one. So hiring people, getting the right people, invaluable.
Sure.
Not even in the value category. It's like from the protection and safety of it, like your life can crumble with a bad hire. Your business can crumble with the right hire that is not the right fit, that you're not watching about these things. And hiring is so expensive on the bottom line from lost productivity for you and your team, culturally, all that.
And it's
Now,
stressful when you're an entrepreneur, you are bringing somebody into your baby,
yeah,
right? It's like you're welcoming somebody into this. And I don't like to use employers as family, but this is your home, right? And so, yeah, it's stressful.
there was a season of time like we all go through where did not have the right fit people in place, and my life was miserable. And from that alone, I'd say take you don't have to go like slow, but be thoughtful and intentional about this process because it does have such a critical effect on everything. And in the WordPress space, with what we're dealing with there too, Lyndi, I know you know some of this, but you know, remote work used to be the big benefit a lot of our members could share because most of our members are remote only. And then through pandemic, remote became kind of more of a thing. And I've heard that sentiment from a lot of our agency owners in particular as they hire. So good people, it's a rare, got to get some magic. Like this whole hiring thing is like, there's science for sure. There's structure. There's things we should be doing and need to be
100%.
doing. There's a lot of this of like, okay, how much do I really, we've in total spent 2.5 hours with this person and we're going to marry them in the sense of,
Right. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't know. But your check-in process too, I think is so critical down the process. Okay. With that being said, money and people, big problems in business, right? Always constant forever.
Always.
We've talked about the front door, getting the right people in the right seats, all that. I want to talk about this thing. I know I've heard from someone we know that you've been sharing publicly from keynote keynotes that you do. This, and I was really intrigued by it, like cheerleading from the quicksand. And I thought we've talked about part of the leader's job, getting the right people in, and how some of that to do that. Now this other part, the position of a leader who often, I thought you nailed the title, cheerleading from the quicksand, I think is the talk.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this because it so much as a leader, I personally, speaking of experience, feel on an island. I'm trying to juggle all these things, put on a pretty face, kind of a smile, not tell everybody I'm worried because we need money in the bank. I'm worried because this existential threat here. But I can't panic my people. And that's so isolating. And that leads to
it's so lonely.
so lonely. And that leads to things like, part of my story, 1.5 years ago, I crashed and burned. Like, I don't even know if there's any wreckage on the ground, but a big burnt spot, and I know it leads to this, what I think is, cheerleading from the quicksand. You nailed it with that concept. That's so often what we do. But tell me what's been kind of ruminating in your own heart, thought, in your work around that concept of, cheerleading from the quicksand. What is the quicksand? What does that lead to? These kind of hard things, this really almost impossible job sometimes of being on the lonely island of a leader.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much because I am so passionate about this. And so I shared, the acquisition of the company that I worked for happened in December of 2020. So, the great news is there was nothing else going on in 2020, right? Like it was just a really boring year and we had an upended healthcare and But no, I mean, truthfully, by the time we got to December 2020, I had had, 9 months of changing our operations and how we were going to see patients, and do we mask, do we not, do we vaccinate, do we, all of those things were happening when then we went from family owned and operated to a large corporation, one of 31 branches. And so it was change layered on change. And it was just, it was hard for me, as a human. My entire team, my 11-person operations team, was the first to get cut. And I knew it. And I'd been a part of the team making these decisions, not making those decisions, but I've been a part of the team leading towards the acquisition. And so when we got the list from the company of who was going to go, that hurt as a human. And that was a team that I'd grown and cultivated. And so anyway, so that happened. And then it was just a year of just losing people and trying to keep the boat afloat. And, credit goes to the corporate team that came in. Had it not been COVID, they would have deployed a team and they would have come on site and done a lot of these things. And instead it was being done remotely. And it was painful. There's no other word for it, but it was painful. And also I can have the retrospect to know that the things that I was being asked to do in that role were so counter to what I enjoy and what brings me joy and what I'm good at. But I had made a commitment to staying on for the owners for 18 months. So I did. And about a year into that was when I started to get my feet underneath me and feel like I could come up for air. When in November of 2021, I lost my older brother to a chronic cancer. And like devastating is not even the word I mean, it was just, it upended me. And so, pandemic, acquisition, the greatest loss I've ever felt in my life, all layered on top of each other. And so at the time, I was running a company of about 75 people with big expectations from the former owners and a family and a household, 2 kids. My parents were grieving, my sister was grieving, my husband was grieving. I mean, that was his brother too. I mean, it was just all of us were in this together. And so what I say is when I got to early 2022, I was not running on fumes. I was running on the memory of fumes. I was pretending like I knew what it was like to have energy or to have any desire to get up and do anything anymore. And I realized, and where I came up with the idea of cheerleading from quicksand, is that I was holding up other people. And I have this image in some of my slide decks of like this crooked pyramid of people, of if you're the foundation. And I've never cheerleaded a day in my life, so I don't get on these stages and do any tumbling. Like that just doesn't happen. Find someone else immediately. No, not me. But so that base of the pyramid, if you're that middle base of the pyramid and you are holding up other people, you have to remember that the people that are in that middle, pyramid piece, they've got messy foundations too. Like they have grief and loss and mental health issues, and they're worried about school and money and whatever else goes along with life, right? And so then when you are lifting up others, if your foundation is not solid, how can you be expected to do a good job of holding up anybody else? And so I have this radical notion that we as leaders have to study our own foundation, that is the only thing that we have any control over, is studying our own foundation. And that includes making sure that we're not burned out, and all of the things that go along with that, of not just self-care. Like it's not about lighting a candle and taking a bath. Like it is so far deeper than that, because we are so far past that, right? It is about setting your boundaries. It is about knowing how, it is teaching people how to treat you. Because I look back on my time there, and there were a lot of things that I knew at my core were counter to my values and how I wanted to live my life and how I wanted to lead others. And I did it anyway, because it was a means to an end. And the toll that it took. And I think that is the thing that I learned. The number one thing is the toll of the sum total of the burnout, of depleting my own core values, depleting my own stock, my own, whatever of fuel and joy and light, what that does over time to your family, to your soul, to your ability to just keep doing this. It's no wonder we're all leaving our workplaces in droves. It's no wonder. And my team, who I loved deeply and still do, and still get to talk to them often. I was not being authentic for them, and I was not being a good leader to them. And my frustration and my difficulties made their lives harder. And I distinctly remember a day I walked into a meeting with my team who was all managers. And I said, Y'all, I'm sorry. I'm not prepared for this meeting. I have no idea what we're doing here. Uh, I don't want to waste your time, but I need you to know that I am not okay. And I don't know what to do here. And I literally watched all of their shoulders relax and they all exhaled and they were, but thank God. We thought you had this figured out. We thought we were the only ones who were just, flailing. And like, thank you for your candor and for being honest that this is how you feel. And like, we were all sitting back, like literally before you got in here, we were like, oh, but like Lindy's doing it. Like, we've got to do it. And so by showing people like, hey, I don't have it all together, you are giving them permission to be not okay. And you are opening the door. And I shared with you, one of the questions I started asking in my team meetings was, what are you doing to take care of yourself this week? And it's not a question that leaders often ask of their team. What are you doing to take care of yourself? How are you pouring into yourself this week? And they would start making changes because they knew that I was going to ask them next week, right? And there's only so many times that you can say nothing. I got nothing for you. But I also
Right.
knew too that they were going to, we had a good relationship. They were going to flip the script on me and be like, what about you?
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that was a phenomenally long, and I could talk about this for a long time because I am so passionate about it, but I couldn't do it anymore. And I know that I have the luxury of quitting my corporate salary and bonus to hang my own shingle and do this on my own. And all of the privilege that's wrapped up in that. And so not everyone has that ability. So in the absence of having to change everything, how can you change everything about how you're approaching your life and your work to not hit burnout so hard?
I think there's so much there is one, probably as a leader, having to hold up everybody else and try to do that. I for sure part honor that role as a leader,
Mhm.
and the other part a little bit resent it, you know. But there was,
Yeah.
because it's I think what was so freeing from what you said is, walking in, I was like, I wonder what she said. I wonder what she did. And what you, to me, was like, there's this idealistic perfection standard we say that I definitely did, and probably why the resentment came is just that I've
Yeah.
got to be on and I've got to show happy and I've got this all the time. And then you just went in and you go, I'm not okay. And that reaction was the human connection. I don't
Yes.
You should not expect me to have it all together all the time. And I think the message to is I don't expect you to,
Yeah.
like,
And I
some
think
of that.
there's a dance there, right? Like you have to make sure that you're not just you have still have to have, people have to have confidence in your competence. Right. And so if you do that time after time of not being prepared for a meeting and not being ready and not being
Right.
like that, definitely degrades a different kind of foundation, right? But yeah, and so like I mean the punchline of that meeting was we then sat down and we were like, all right, let's power through it. How are we going to do this? What do you know that I don't? What do you need that I have? And how can we do this together? And that meeting was so much more productive when we were being open and honest about our bandwidth, about our knowledge, about our comfort level, than if we had all just come in and put on a face and, oh, look, I know what I'm doing. And, but yeah, for sure as an entrepreneur too, you are leading a team of people who are looking to you for all the answers. And you're keeping the lights on for other people. And like, I know nobody takes that lightly, but sometimes we just have to be really open and honest about like, hey, here's where I am today, and here's what I need you to know.
Hmm. I'm curious for my own interest, but I think for others too. So when you said like not everything has changed, but I've got to still, in tech, we have this thing of like with product particularly is we got to fly the plane while it's on fire.
Mhm.
It's almost like that. It's like we got to keep flying the plane, even though I feel like the engine just exploded and drifted
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
I'm curious what insights and help and a direction you have for
Mhm.
how how do you do that? How do you
Yeah. So
keep your fire going when you're like it's out? It feels
it's out.
or it's getting there. We
Yeah,
definitely don't want to be where it's like out. We've crashed and burned. You're
yeah,
right. So what
yeah,
thoughts and advice and shares do you
yeah.
have?
And I love that analogy. I always say that I build planes while they go down the runway because I'm totally comfortable with just like figuring stuff out. Like, oh, we don't have a wing, it's fine. Like we'll get there. But I love that analogy of like you got to crash, you got to fly the plane while it's burning, while it's on fire. And so I think you have to have some introspection as to like triaging where you are in the burn, right? So is it a wing fire? Is it an engine fire? Is
Mm,
it is it a rickety captain seat, or is it like
mm,
nose diving? And so, for me, I tell this story very openly, but it was probably about February of 2022. I distinctly remember I had one kid in the bathtub and one kid in the shower, and my husband came and I was staring at the wall. And he was like, "What is happening?" And I was like, "I'm in a hole and I'm not certain I'm ever going to get out." And like to his credit, like he was like, "We're like, I'll find you a ladder, like we'll get out, like just let's do this together." And so luckily I'd been working with a therapist through COVID because COVID was really hard on a raging extrovert. Like that was just so
yes.
thankfully I'd already started doing some of that deep work. But with the help of my therapist, and I found a family doctor that I trust, which is huge. I'd had a family doctor that I just didn't feel like really listened to me. And so together I started medication, and almost immediately, and I know it's not always immediate, but like within a couple of weeks, I felt like a different human. So for me, that was my first step. But depending on where you are, like if it's just like an uncomfortable seat, like maybe it's a visit with your EAP, your employee assistance program. Maybe it is looking at your calendar and looking at what drains your energy and how you can reassess your schedule. So everybody's journey through this is going to be so different. And I do a lot of coaching. And so I really start out with a baseline of figuring out where people are, and what the triage is of where we start. So it's going to be different for each and every person.
I think there's so many basics there though that really resonate with me too. It's just okay, therapist, have one, two, have had one for a very long time now. And taking care of the head and heart, the inner space of
100%.
what you're dealing with, be able to kind of unpack this because leaders, it's isolating. Entrepreneurship, definitely live that one for sure. And but having someone again, just like from hiring an HR, is having someone third party that you don't have to say at Thanksgiving, pass the cranberries.
Yeah,
Absolutely. But I want to
100%.
emphasize this too, is like you said, a doctor,
Yes.
so we're dealing with head and heart, inside, inner work, but we're also that material physical body going to a physician. That anchoring, I think so many as entrepreneurs go, I can't take the time to go do that. I can't do that. But like we're
Yeah.
talking about, if we're flying the plane, you still need the mechanic on the ground to make sure the engine turbines are running, fuel systems are good. Those are basic, but I think we gloss over those too
Well, and
many.
I think, and I talk about this, this is almost like an afterthought in cheerleading from quicksand is your physical health. And like, sorry to cut you off, but like you just lit like a whole fire in my brain.
Go for it.
Um, I think a lot of times, especially as entrepreneurs, and for me when I was an executive, I had this like, it was my ego, 100% it was my ego telling me there's no way that you could possibly take the time to leave this building, get in your car, drive to a doctor's office, handle the thing, and come back to work. That they can't be without you for that long, right? And so I tell this story on myself. So I had a period of time of about 6 months where I would wake up and my right eye would be watering, and it just irritated me because I couldn't put my eye makeup on until it stopped watering. And then, and I knew I needed to go to the eye doctor, but like who had the time? I was running a company, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Fast forward to the week, the owner or I'm sorry, the president of the new company was coming in town. And I was the only executive other than the owners who was going to meet with him. And this cornea tore almost in half. It was
Oh,
super painful. And like it turns like this color red, right? We went to dinner at a really nice steakhouse in town, and we planned my seat at the table to where my good eye would be facing him. Not only did I not go, not only did I go handle the thing with my eye, like we just changed my seating arrangement, right?
yeah.
And thank God for my boss who the next day was like, listen, I will drive you to my personal eye doctor, but you have to go get this figured out. And fast forward to, it's been 2 years almost since I've been going through 3 years. It's going to be 3 years in August. I've had 2 surgeries. I've sat in countless eye doctors' offices. I've missed work. I've had to have my husband like walk me into Dean McGee like he was my seeing eye dog because I literally could not see. And so, like, as it turns out, folks, you get two eyeballs. You get two chances to get that right. But my
Yeah.
ego told me that I could not miss work to go get that watery eye handled. And so, like, I always venture a guess in a room full of people of like, you have something you're putting off health wise. I know you are. Go handle it. Like, you can miss an hour now, or you can miss hours and hours later, weeks, days. So anyway, that's my soapbox. But like, yeah, find a healthcare provider that you trust. Go to all the ologists that you need to.
Yep.
Because like listen to your body when it whispers, because if you don't, like, it will
Mm.
start screaming at you. It will start screaming at you, and mine did, and it was super painful and really annoying.
Well, it's as crazy. Our mindset too is that, okay, we're vitally important. We have to do all these things. But okay, well, if you don't have your eyes or your hands or different things, or your
Your
physical
brain, your
body
mental, yeah.
isn't cared for, but taking that time is tough, because I feel like we have a system that just kind of push pressure down on us, and we probably shoulder that too. But it's like, this time has forced me to go, well, it's time. You can't not take care of yourself
Can't
anymore. And
not go deal with it.
that's an actual physical component. Finding
Yeah,
those
but
right.
what message did that send to my team too?
Exactly.
Right?
I was almost going to say, if we see an important team member, any team member on a team struggling with something, we're probably going to say, stop now, go to the
Yes.
whatever ologist you need to do,
Oh, I preached
because
it to
like,
my team all day long, but then I didn't do it. So then they didn't think they could. Yeah, yeah, it's a mess. So just take care of yourself. That's you get one chance, and nobody's gonna do it for you. Like nobody, like, I mean, short of my boss being like, I will put your backside in the car and drive you to the eye doctor. Like, most people are not that kind. Nobody is going to take you to what you need to go to until it's a must. So do it for yourself.
well, and if you're like me, I'm Captain Obvious or Oblivious, obvious or oblivious, one of the two. Um, where probably everybody, and Lindsay too, you mentioned your husband, Brad, and it's like having significant other, if it's spouse, somebody else that's kind of watching, going, hey, I feel like you're getting into a crater. I feel like you're getting ready to go into a crater. We got to have that as
Yes.
entrepreneurs, though, and maybe even leaders. Have this ideal of rugged individualists, like we're supposed to tackle everything, be superhuman. And for me, Lindsay's obviously my truth teller. So when I would get stressed out, she was like, time to go on a run, time to go on a run, go run. At that time, that was a stress relief valve for me. But someone just to go, I love you, I care about you, you're getting into a dark space, a bad space right now. Having some kind of significant other, with its friend, spouse, someone, just to go, hey, I don't think things are going
Something's
overall.
not right, but that takes trust, right?
Hmm.
There has to be trust there.
Yep.
And the person has to trust that you're going to respond well to that, right? But absolutely. And so, I always say, anything that, if you're not sure, like, what your stress triggers are, if you're not sure, ask, phone a friend. They know, and they will tell you. Like when I had an intern in one of my early jobs who we were like on a 3-day like project with a vendor. And on the third day, she at 10 o'clock on the dot, she handed me an individual bag of almonds. And she said, I've noticed that you do better when you've had a snack. So I brought you a so true. I am better when fed. And so, like, if you don't know yourself, the chances are someone you spend a lot of time with does, and they know what you need. And so asking, and then doing them the same favor, like, how can I help you? Where are you struggling, and how can we get you out?
Yep. Well, this burnout thing and the quick sound, it truly is. It's this feeling of I'm sinking while trying to hold everybody else up. And I think your example of the graphic you talked about was like, everybody else has their own form of quicksand. Sometimes we often forget that too. Like, we're the only one, probably not, right? they, we should encourage the support networks for everybody in this, but then leaders oftentimes are the ones that get taken care of last.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the ripple effect of that is what we're seeing with Great Resignation, with not being able to find the right team members, people leaving in droves to go work for themselves because they just can't do the shuffle anymore. And like, look, I'm one of them. But I just think that the only thing we can control is our own foundation, how we take care of ourselves, how we approach the world, and our foundation is it. Our mental, our physical, emotional health is all we can control. Everything else is out of our control. And so when you look at it that way, I think you can turn a lot of things around just by focusing on your own foundation.
Well, yeah, and I know you just mentioned the quiet quitting, and pandemic had a big ripple and shake up, and we're seeing some of that. I don't even know if it's settling, but the dust is there, right? And that seems to, know your feelings on this, is there's a leadership interest, what I'm trying to say, a mirror to leadership too, and all that. So
yeah,
talk to me about for a second while we kind of wind down, is like quiet quitting, the talent reshuffling we've seen, this whole introduction to the rest of the world tech's kind of been like, yeah, we're here for a long time. We've been doing remote for decades.
yeah.
In this, there is a leadership part in this that reflects of how we're taking care of ourselves, right?
Yeah. And I think the hardest thing we do as leaders is to hold up that mirror to ourselves, because it's like that mirror in the bathroom with the really bad lighting that you're like, do I really look like this? That's the mirror that we have to hold up. And I think immature leaders tend to blame everybody else. And I think so much of the rhetoric out there right now is, oh, quiet quitting, people are lazy, they don't want to work, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. No, I mean, the truth is that we spent the last 3 years reevaluating what's important to us and what's not, and what we are willing to tolerate and what we are not willing to tolerate. And if you want to be a key leader, if you want to be a mature leader, you have to hold up the mirror with every person who leaves your organization and ask, what role did I play in that? And how can I do that differently? What policies and procedures have I put in place to make it not a safe environment for people? What practices are happening? What am I enabling? The number one thing that causes an A player to leave is to watch a C player get away with everything. I firmly believe that if you are losing your top talent, you need to look at what's your lowest talent, what they're doing and what they're allowed to do. But then also, I think our job is to those that we have the luxury of still having on our teams, asking them, is there anything that caused you to think about leaving? Like what keeps you here, and what risk is there to you leaving? Because we always do exit surveys, right? But asking, what's keeping you here? What makes you consider leaving? I mean, I think those kind of things are so valuable to stop the bleed, and to stop, to use your analogy, to keep the engine from lighting on fire. Because I think it ripples, right? You lose someone else is picking up the slack for that person until you hire someone, and then they get, and it just builds on itself. And so just and then again too, I think another great question to ask in your one-on-ones is, how are you taking care of yourself this week? What are you doing to pour into yourself so that you are not depleted? And I think that if leaders begin asking those kind of questions, their teams will know that they are here for them, and that they can be vulnerable, and they can be their true selves at work. So I don't know. I think that's where it starts.
Fantastic. Lyndi, thank you for your time. We've gone over a little bit. These could have been two parts, but I couldn't help myself. Like, we got to get into this one too. These are two parts of valuable conversation. I think they very much connect. You're not doing this kind of intentional, thoughtful work on the front end, finding the right fits, accessing people that can help you. To make some of that more objective and go, okay, are we seeing this right? That just complicates the leader's dilemma here. If we're not getting the right person. So, and asking those questions, I love you're so simple yet so profound. Like that one question you just mentioned, how are you taking care of yourself, is like, you're going to expect to get asked it. You should be getting asked it back.
If you're not ready to ask it today, that's fine. But next time I need you to be ready.
Well, Lyndi, thank you so much for this time. I know I want to have the opportunity to ask you back on because there's more we can be talking about and tapping into your vast experiences, your expertise, all that you do in the world. And thank you for doing it. And good luck. I know you're giving your next keynote on Friday about this. It's change that needs to happen in the world. The message needs to be heard. And so we just walk more healthily in our world. So thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.